right, welcome to Small Time Songwriter. Thank you, Chris. My buddy Chris is on the podcast today. I really appreciate you jumping on, and I don't expect my friends to ever know what Small Time Songwriter is, because if we all kept track of our projects, we'd all be in trouble, right? If we had to keep track of every friend's project. So Small Time Songwriter is mostly just the other guys, the guys that are just smaller than John Mayer and Taylor Swift, and we're all kind of carving our way through it. You're definitely carving a path. I've been noticing in the last few months. You've been busy. So I'm really happy to have this interview with you and get to know you. So this is Chris Morse. Tell me your story, man. I want to hear it from the beginning, and let's go like straight up VH1 behind the music kind of thing.
Yeah, do we want to go like way back to when I first started
Yeah,
being involved in music?
yeah, I guess I'm just curious on how people get to where they're at, as artists. You kind of have a very pop kind of sound to my ears anyway.
Yeah.
But I wonder how you got there, because everybody gets there in different ways. So I just want to hear about how you got there.
Yeah. Um, well, both my parents are classical musicians,
Okay, already a bit
and so
weird.
I grew up in that world.
Yeah,
There was no Beatles or Beach Boys or Stones playing in our house. It was all Mozart and Beethoven and
hmm,
all those classical composers. Um, so I didn't really listen to the radio until middle school.
hmm.
When I heard what my friends were listening to, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?"
Oh, that's really
Um,
interesting. So not till middle school. That's pretty
yeah,
late in the game. Yeah.
yeah, and I was also at that time at a boarding school called the American Boy Choir School, which is a super serious, um, classically based choir school.
Hmm.
We had 3.5 hours of rehearsals a day, and went on tour, had school on the bus, did the whole Carnegie Hall thing.
Cool.
Um,
I always wonder about this with choir people, especially professional choir people. Is it hard to like shake it a little bit when you're getting started and you're performing and sharing your songs? Like, do you feel like maybe sometimes you just run into old habits of something? It's just different. Like, what's the difference between singing in a choir and then singing as a solo artist?
uh, that's a good question. I would say the biggest difference is probably that in a choir you're supposed to blend in with everybody else.
Hmm.
And as a soloist, you want to stand out.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you
Go
know,
on.
trying to figure out different ways to stylize the way I sing, so it's not strictly for blending with other people,
That's interesting. I think.
has been a challenge. That and learning the improv side of the more pop style, because everything in classical music is, you have everything on the page, you do
Mm,
exactly what's
right.
written, and
Right.
that's it. There's no thinking on your own.
Right.
Um,
You're at the
so
mercy of the
that's
composer.
been a big struggle for me.
That's really interesting. I think about this too with backup vocalists, because I have some friends that are just like, they make their money off of doing background vocals. And what I find is that sometimes they forget that they are the main vocal when they're doing main vocal things. And they sort of, it's hard to describe for like a person that's not a musician, but it's almost like a too clean approach. Like it's like too perfect and too the tonality is like too pristine that it becomes just sort of like part of the wallpaper, because it's supposed to be bigger than the sum of its parts. You know what I mean? Like the sum of its parts are supposed to be bigger than that one voice when you're a
Yeah.
background vocalist or you're a choir like a choir person. So I wonder, like, is that, you told me it's a bit of a struggle, or it has been a bit of a struggle. Can you tell me about that, what that process was?
Uh, yeah, well, it's just been an ever evolving kind of thing
Hmm.
where, there hasn't been, I guess there probably should have been a more, uh, what's the word? A more direct approach to figuring that out, but it's just sort of been
Sure.
trial and error.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all of us, right? We're all just kind of trying stuff. So back to your VH1 story. So
Yeah,
you're in the
yeah.
choir. You're starting to listen to pop music in middle school. What were you listening to? You
Mhm.
remember?
Uh, at the time, let's see, what was on the radio then? It was like that was like the NSYNC, Backstreet Boys
Oh yeah, nice.
time. Yeah,
I love
all
that
those
stuff.
guys were coming up,
Yeah,
and all those female pop stars, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera,
sure. Shania Twain.
uh, yep, Shania
Yeah.
Twain, um,
Well,
Blink 182.
Blink 182. Yeah, awesome.
Yep,
So, what was
I
that
went.
like? I mean, because I grew up in a house full of popular music for the most part. Like, I grew up with a lot of blues and soul and Philly soul and all that stuff. Like, I didn't grow up with any classical music. I guess you could say like mariachi music is classical, but it's more like folk traditional kind of stuff. And I didn't grow up with dun 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 dun. I mean, I guess I did if I was doing a hip hop sample, but 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 I just mean like, what was it? I can't imagine what it was like. It must have been like being on mushrooms for the first time or something. Like you're hearing something, you're like, what the hell is this? Can you talk about that? Do you remember?
I don't remember like the first time I heard a pop song. But the more I heard it from my friends, I think it was the first time that I enjoyed listening to music.
Hmm.
And all the classical stuff at home, it was fine. It was on in the background all the time,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't really listen to it. To me, it didn't feel like there was anything I could grab onto and that was re-listenable.
Right. And then you
And
found,
so when I started hearing those pop melodies, especially with the rhythm and the strong beats, that was like, oh wow, I can grab onto this and remember
yeah,
it and sing
cool.
along to it.
And did it feel, I guess what I wonder about influences with people is how does it get in under your skin? You know what I mean? Like what is the environment that you're in at the time that just sort of takes over you and then you become part of this thing? Because that's what music I've noticed really does to a lot of people. You sort of absorb it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
we have like a, I think everybody has a little bit of like a music allergy. Like I have a music allergy to like polka music or something, but then there's these other ones that just like really, they just do something to me when I hear it. It's immediate, you know what I mean?
hmm
And did you feel that way? Do you remember if you felt that way as you were exploring like these pop tracks now, and I just, like I just curious about that. Have you ever thought about that in your career now that you're more understanding of your influences and all that?
Yeah, I didn't feel that way until I heard Room for Squares, John Mayer's first
John
record.
Mayer. Yeah. Yeah, you're a big John Mayer fan. Let's talk about that because that's a pretty
Yeah.
big influence in your work, right? How does
Yeah.
how does John Mayer influence you and why? Tell me why. Oh, sorry.
Nice. Um, yeah, that's the first time I had heard pop music that was on the radio that I immediately wanted to learn more about. Like, not just, oh, this is a cool song, I can sing along to it, it's memorable, but how is this made? What's the writing process? How does he play that way?
How is
I
this
wanted to do it.
made is an interesting question. I want to dig more into that. Is that how your brain works? You think about what is the production behind this and what are the notes behind the everything, or do you go into, is that sort of how your mind works as an artist where you're thinking logistics of it, you know what I mean?
A lot of the time, yeah.
Cool. That's a cool way to think about it. I wish I had that kind of brain.
Yeah.
That's it, because I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like that would be very useful, you know what I mean? Because you're figuring
hmm,
out the mechanics as you listen to it. You think that's like a leftover from classical?
it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. It very well could be. I mean, my dad composes a lot, so he thinks about how to put sounds together to make a cohesive whole piece. So,
That is super interesting. That gives me a lot of insight in how you listen to stuff, because you're basically like making a choice to deconstruct so that you can figure out what you want to keep and what you want to like. This is medium, but I'll take this and work it through into my music instead of like osmosis. It's almost like a subconscious like intention or something. It's pretty fascinating to me to hear
huh.
that you started the sentence with like how it was made. I think that's cool.
Yeah, well, I've always been good at picking out individual parts in a record,
Hmm.
and I'll have music go on in the car and tell Mary like, "Oh, did you hear that harmony or did you hear that cool snare lick that was only in that part of the song?" And
Yeah.
she's
Okay.
like, "Dude,
Cool.
what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're saying."
Okay, so you're influenced by Room for Squares,
Yep.
and it's sort of blowing your mind, right? It's like the Pink Floyd of your generation. And then, and as you're going through it, you're what are you doing? What are you thinking about, and how are you exploring your own music? You know, are you just starting with like covering John Mayer? Are you sort of deconstructing his playing style, that kind of thing? What are you doing?
Well, I hadn't picked up a guitar until I heard that record.
Hmm. Okay.
So that's what made me pick up the guitar and start playing. And you know, I was nowhere near being able to play any of those songs
Right.
when I was first learning. I was just plucking out chords, and the strings would buzz, and
Yeah.
uh my fingers were sore after I played. Um, but I loved it, and I immediately would start making up my own things like, oh, here's how you play the D chord. What happens if we take off the middle finger or
Hmm.
the index finger?
You
What kind
immediately
of sound does
started.
that make?
Okay, so you
And,
had a very
and I
like explorative kind of nature to it. It was immediate that you were already writing.
Yeah, yeah, I immediately started playing with sounds and how to form, suspended chords or augmented or whatever it is.
Did you end up going formal with that? Did you take lessons, or did you do self-taught?
I took one guitar lesson
Uh-huh.
and it was terrible
Well,
because the
I wonder about it because I was thinking like you come from such a classical structured background that I wonder if you kind of like rebelled your way into the acoustic guitar or into the guitar, you know?
yeah, well, I wanted to take lessons because I wanted to learn more about it. Um, but I took this one lesson from a guy who was an incredible bass player, and he played guitar and taught both.
Hmm.
Uh, and it seemed like the whole time in this first lesson, he was saying like, "Pretty soon you'll be able to do this." And I was like, "Well, that's great, but you're just
Yeah.
showing off. You're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
telling me how to do anything."
All right.
And yeah, one of my best friends at the time was a really accomplished guitar player. He was playing along with Dream Theater and Rush.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are
So
some hard
he
songs, man.
yeah, yeah. He was showing me a ton of stuff. So he was sort of a teacher, but it wasn't like a formal environment.
Yeah. That's cool. So I think of you as a highly technical songwriter when I look at how you perform and I listen to your melodic choices and your music style. And I wonder, do you feel that, like, I guess if you could just kind of let me know what you think the pros and cons of being so technical is, you know what I mean? Because I think there's pros and cons every, like me, I couldn't figure out what a F sharp note was. If you told me to point it out on the fretboard, I'd be like, I don't know. Sounds kind of like this, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
But I know that's such a big con for me because especially when I'm like collaborating with people, I have a hard time figuring out keys and notes and things like that for the people
Hmm.
to come with me. And then I also have such a strange rhythm habit where my rhythm is very staggered. I sort of equate it to like it's kind of like a drunk guy walking steps, you know. And
Yeah.
I like it for me, but it's hard to collaborate. It's kind of like the con of being so
Hmm.
powered by sensation instead of technical. So I wonder what are the pros and cons of being really technical because you are very technical. You like whenever you perform, I see the discipline of like somebody that was in something that was very structured. I can hear that there's like no buzz on the string. There's no like every transition is like rock solid. Every vocal choice is rock solid vocal. Nothing goes like too far out of the realm, but so everything stays like within pitch and perfectness all the time. You know what I mean? I think that's really cool. And I think that's something I wish I had. So I just wonder from your point of view.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I I think that comes from my background being in the boy choir and having classical parents. Um, and it's helpful from a writing and performing perspective because it's I feel like it's easy to get the sounds that I want. but at the same time, I feel like a big con is being able to, I think I struggle with putting in that raw emotion that someone like you seems like you do effortlessly.
Well, I only
And I
do that because I suck at the technical. I would do the technical if I could.
well,
But
I feel like, you know, uh having that raw emotion is such a big piece of what we do, and it's
mhm,
so important, especially if you're trying to connect with people and build a fan base and all that stuff. So I'm constantly working on how to be more vulnerable when I'm on stage, and um, perform in a more raw, authentic way.
and do you find that difficult? Do you find it difficult to be a little more emotional in general?
Yes.
Do you
Yeah.
have you ever thought about why? Like, why do you feel that way?
Well, I think growing up and singing at such a high level at such a young age,
Hmm.
everything had to be perfect all the time, and there
Yeah,
wasn't room to necessarily put my own spin on it. A, because I was in a choir and I was trying to blend with everybody else, and B, because it was a very strict classical environment. This is how it's sung, no questions asked.
yeah.
And so yeah, trying to infuse my own music with more emotion is something I'm constantly chasing.
Evolving with, right?
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I mean, I'm always really fascinated with like perfectionist people because I'm not really a perfectionist anything. I just kind of do stuff and I kind of I get I mean, I get self-conscious. I definitely get self-conscious. Like I wish I was better at what I did or whatever, but
Hmm.
and I also have a real, I don't know if you're like this, but I also have a really hard time believing people. Like if someone says they like me, I'm just kind of like, do you? You know what I mean? Or they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
hey, that was a great song. I'm like, was it? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of, I have a little bit of that kind of thing. But I wonder like that perfectionism, I know it's a good thing, but I know it's a bad thing. But I'm wondering like for you, for Chris Morse, like what is, um, I don't know what's it like in your head when you're using your perfectionism and like the performance and also the songwriting process. Like what's going on in there? What kind of tempest is brewing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, in terms of performance, um, I immediately notice if I'm out of tune,
Yeah,
while I'm playing a song. And even if someone comes up to me after a show and says that was amazing, I'm
yeah,
still thinking in the back of my head like, oh, I messed up that one transition in the song, even if it wouldn't have been noticeable to anybody else.
yeah.
I know that it wasn't right.
Right,
And so
right.
that's frustrating to me. Um, and then in the writing process, it's very hard not to edit myself when I'm just starting a song.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
That's
because I know it's important to just get the words out there, get the feeling
right.
out there, and then you can go back and edit later.
Yes. Yes. That's always like the preferred route is just they're, they say like the song comes to you, so you just have to listen to it. And then you can go back and recalculate the context of it all. But there is a
Yeah.
moment in like everybody's art form when they're just having to do it and they just need to be in like a doing mode rather than
Hmm.
a analytical mode. Um, so I guess the reason why I'm asking you these questions because one of the things that I've noticed about you on social media is that you have like a lot of like populist kind of like posts. You have posts that like really kind of get to the simple things and the sort of almost like a self-help motivational kind of slant that happens. You'll share things about mental health and I wonder like is that a big deal to you? Is that something that you just kind of you feel that a lot of people struggle with, or do you feel like you struggle with it and you're looking for your pack? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have struggled with mental health personally. I've been in therapy
Yeah.
on and off for years.
Samesies.
Um, yeah, I think it's something that's super important. I think it's something that everyone should investigate. We all have our little quirks and things that were handed down from our parents that aren't the right way to
Right.
think about things, or we have um misrepresented opinions about ourselves that influence how we interact with the world.
Sure.
um and so yeah, I try and be really open about mental health and share things that I think might be valuable to people. And hopefully if someone's having a day and they're just struggling and they see a post, maybe that's
So,
just a nice reminder to them.
so do you find that sharing those kinds of things are a good way to connect with your audience, or are you like strengthen the connection with your audience, or are you thinking like, like, okay, so here's an example. So for me, I'm a person who like does a lot of like like Bodio Kid jokes on my Instagram and stuff like that. Like I'll do like a funny Mexican joke or something about being
Uh-huh.
Hispanic or being Chicano or whatever, or being Italian or whatever. And what I find me doing is like I'm sort of doing it to see who laughs at it. Like I'm sort of doing it to see who's like with me and understands me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's kind of like my version of like seeking my pack, right? So I wonder, like for you, is it do you do that because you're thinking of the people, or are you also thinking of yourself of like, they'll feel less alone, but I'll feel less alone?
I think it's more the second one.
Oh, that's interesting.
um yeah, but mainly I just want to engage with people more and have actual conversations instead of just posting things and saying, "Hey, look at this. Look at me. Look at me."
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I try and interact with as many people as I can. And I found that doing those polls has been really great to start conversations with people that I might not
Yeah.
have ever talked to otherwise.
Okay, so you use it like as a funnel to start up a conversation, because like some of the things you post are very populist in the terms of like what's your favorite pizza or topping or something like that. Like they're not all like you can get it, Tiger. You know what I mean? Like it's not like all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But I just like, I guess, for a lot of us, we're all sort of navigating through social media and we're navigating through finding our audience. And I wonder how that's going for you. Like, what do you think is working and what do you think's not working? Because maybe it'll help whoever's listening, including myself. So
Yeah, I finding your audience is so important and can be really difficult. I still feel like I'm honing in on who exactly it is,
mm,
but I have a pretty good idea.
yeah,
Um, and I guess what I would say to do is look at artists that you want to sound like or you want to emulate, and maybe whose personalities you vibe with. Like,
right,
oh, love that person's music, and I feel like we would get along, want to hang out with them.
sure.
Uh, and from there, see who their fans are and start to interact with that community a little more.
Hmm. Gotcha. Do you feel that that's working for you? Do you feel pretty good about? I mean, because I stalk all my friends. It's kind of like what I do with when it comes to like this stuff. I'm constantly researching, constantly trying to see like where my buddies are playing, what are they doing. I even look at
Yeah.
everybody's numbers. Like I'll look at like, oh, Chris had this many followers on Wednesday, but now it's been a week and he's got 100 more followers. You know what I mean? So do you think that that is based upon like the way you engage on social media, or do you feel like that's just coming from like straight up horsepower, where it's just kind of like you're out, you're playing the shows, you're doing the gigs and all that?
I think it comes more from playing live
Yeah,
than doing stuff online because you know, the whole social media game is
a
an
nightmare.
attention game.
Yeah, yeah.
And so many people are asking for everyone's attention.
Hmm.
It's hard to get people to uh, break away from something they already know to give attention to something they don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
How?
and so I
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
yeah, I was just gonna say for me personally, the biggest jumps in followers I've seen has been from live shows.
Yeah, and you've been hustling, buddy. I've been seeing you. You're working a lot. You're doing gig after gig every. I mean, how many? What are you averaging right now? You doing like two a week or once a week or something like that at the moment? Like you're being pretty consistent. You're really going for it. What's that like on you though? What's that like for your spirit? Is it tough to like always be driving to the next gig, or does it really just fill your cup no matter where you're playing? Like, what's your approach to taking gigs and performing places?
Yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun to hop in the car and drive somewhere you've never been before and see what a new place is like and play for some new faces. I think that's a ton of fun and meeting new people and connecting with new people. Um, at the same time, I try to be selective with what gigs I do take.
Hmm.
Because it's relatively easy to get those 3 hour
Yeah.
brewery or bar gigs where you're just stuck in a corner, background noise, nobody's really listening.
Yeah.
It's good if you get two or three people to turn around and give you a little clap.
Yeah, I was talking to a established artist, got coffee with them like a few days ago, and they said um, you could find the gig and you can scrape a living, but will you be happy? Essentially, is what she was saying. So it was pretty
Yeah.
interesting to hear that from like an established artist who's like constantly on the work ethic and hustle. Um, so let's talk about your songs because we're gonna kind of bounce back to your VH1 here. But so you're
Okay.
listening to Room for Squares. You're dissecting John Mayer and how to be him for a little while. And then when do you start finding your own voice? When does it start coming out where it's like, oh, this is a Chris Morse song. This isn't a John Mayer adjacent song.
Yeah. Well, shortly after I discovered Room for Squares, I started listening to Jason Mraz.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started writing my own songs, I thought, man, if I can combine the guitar work of John Mayer with the vocals of Jason Mraz, that'll be a killer combination.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to do uh, the best impression I could of both of those guys and combining those two skills. And I think who I am as an artist now is um, partly my failure
Yeah,
to
yeah,
replicate
yeah,
those
yeah, yeah. I
guys.
know, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is kind of that, right? It's kind of like your identity as an artist really falls under the fact that you couldn't be anybody else. You know what I mean?
right.
Which I think is really cool. And you have influences now that probably have shaped where you're going. So you probably have different artists now. So you had John Mayer, you had Jason Mraz, and then who's driving you now as you're moving on into the next phase of Christopher Morse.
Yeah, as I've gotten older, I've loved diving into the songwriting that's coming out of Nashville.
Hmm.
Um, Guys like Dave Barnes, Ben Rector, Matt Wirtz. Um, yeah, those guys who aren't necessarily big names, but they've done an incredible job of putting out really high quality songwriting, and they've
Yeah,
built really dedicated fan bases.
sure. Yeah, is that kind of your next? Is that what you have your eyes set on nowadays? Like a career that sort of emulates that sort of feeling of, have your community and not worry about whether you're winning a Grammy.
Yeah. I mean, when I was first starting out, I had stars in my eyes about like, oh, I'm gonna be, what Ed Sheeran is now
Yeah,
and selling out stadiums and stuff. But um, I think if you can find your tribe of people who love what you do and you're able to make a living off of creating your art, then that's a huge win. There
that's
aren't there aren't many aspiring songwriters who are able to play live all the time, who are even able to put out music.
right.
So even just doing that is a win.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking about Nashville, and you have some friends out there, right, in Nashville?
Yeah, I have a small handful of friends. Yep.
Yeah, and you recently took a trip there, right? Was it your
Hmm.
first trip to one of the Meccas,
Yeah.
to one of the
Yeah,
promised lands?
it was my first time down there in May.
Cool. And you want to talk about a little bit about your experience there? What did you find? Because I know you're a Colorado-based singer-songwriter, but we're friends, so we chat, and I know that you have a lot of love for Nashville artists and that scene over there. And I can kind of envision you like making the move someday. I'm not sure, but I want to know like what your thoughts on all of that. So, what was your experience like? Would you ever see yourself becoming a Nashville artist?
Yeah, I mean, I had a blast when I was down there. Um, Met so many people. Everyone was so nice and so welcoming, um, which was a little bit surprising considering how many musicians there are there.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of
But I,
known it's kind of known for being cutthroat with the industry and all that.
yeah, but at the same time, I mean, everyone was so welcoming, and I heard
It's because you're a
this
visitor, not a
advice.
renter. That's why.
Well, maybe could be, could
But
be,
go
but
go ahead.
I heard the same advice from almost everyone I talked to, and it was, you know, be nice to absolutely everybody you meet
Mhm.
because you never know who the next number one writer is going to be, or you know who's going to blow up as an artist next
Right.
week. The person that you had a co-write with yesterday
Yeah.
might write with someone tomorrow and their song goes number one. And if they enjoyed writing with you, they're going to call you again and say, "Hey, man, I had a great time writing with you. Let's do it again." Now you're writing with a number one artist.
So did you get a lot of co-writes going out there? Did you have enough time for that? Because you went to like a conference or something, right? And then you played some gigs, some in the round gigs.
Yeah, I was down there for a music conference.
Hmm.
Um, and then I was able to book a couple writers rounds while I was down there and did a couple co-writes.
Cool.
Yeah, so the conference was only 3 days,
Yeah.
and I was able to extend my trip to be a full week. So
Nice.
those other 4 days, I was just checking out the town, meeting as many people as I could, and yeah, I got to play those couple writers rounds and do a couple co-writes, which were amazing.
So, do you feel a pull? Do you feel like some magnetism about that town and that scene? Like if you, because there's a lot of different kinds of scenes. Like there's the Texas scene, and then there's like the LA scene, and then there's the New York scene, and then there's the Nashville scene. So, I wonder, like, did it feel like a glove in hand kind of thing?
Kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I can
I
hear, I can hear, I can hear your wife Mary in the background go, "Oh God."
yeah, I mean, we were on the phone while I was there looking at houses in Nashville saying like, man, this might be the move.
Wow, that's
So
interesting.
yeah, I mean it's in the back of our minds, and um yeah, that might be in the cards.
So
We'll see. There's no set timeline right now, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any set timeline when you're trying to buy a house. You just do your
yeah.
best. What do you think? What do you think is the difference between like the Nashville scene and the Colorado scene that you run into for your style of music, for your artistry?
Uh I think in Nashville the style that I play is a lot more prevalent,
Hmm.
and here in Colorado not so much.
Yeah, in the Front Range especially, it's a lot of like bluegrass or jam band kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of bluegrass, jam band, and like strict old school traditional folk
Yeah.
music,
When you say
which are
that,
all great.
yeah, of course, yeah. But when you say old school traditional folk, what do you mean?
Guys like John Prine
Oh,
or
right. Okay.
uh, Simon and Garfunkel, or even a little country influence like Willie Nelson.
Sure, sure.
Um, and I found that my sort of pop leaning style, it's
Like
I don't know.
the commercial quality just sits better in like a commercial town.
Yeah.
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 That makes
So,
sense. Yeah, I can see that. I think it's pretty interesting. I always wonder, like, when artists want to leave the nest, because we always have like these little moments where we try to build up a fan base or a scene or some kind of group of something in the towns that we're in, and then we start to sort of see that maybe like there's a different town for us, you know. Um, and I wonder, how much are you pondering that now? Because you're an artist and you're performing and you're trying to scrape a living like the rest of us, you know. So how much of that is in the back of your mind where you're just kind of like, am I in the right place? Am I in the right time? That kind of thing.
yeah, I guess it's kind of a constant in the back of my head. You
Yeah.
know, I think we're all trying to find our niche,
Mm,
and
yeah.
um if you find that and you find people who love what you do, then you're golden.
Right.
Um it was pretty amazing to me. I worked the merch table for Eric Hutchinson when he came through town,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a couple songs that were on the radio back in the late
2010s. Yeah.
2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah.
Um, but since then, things have been pretty quiet. But he sold out the room,
Yeah.
and the people that were there bought everything on his merch table.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, he had a small but incredibly loyal fan base, which is amazing.
Yeah. So how do you think he gets a fan base like that? Because I think that's the goal for all of us, right? We're trying to find like the loyal fan base. Because I think what you're talking about is that we need to stop chasing what we think is like the golden egg, and then just kind of focus in on the art that we do and the
Yeah.
actual like authenticity that we give. So I wonder. Sometimes I think about this too, because I'm the same way as you. Like I'm trying to. I mean, we're chasing different things, but I'm still thinking about, whatever it is I'm chasing. Why haven't I latched onto it yet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
um and it can be frustrating. You're just kind of like spinning your wheels half the time. um so I guess what I wonder with you is, like, you're obviously playing a lot of shows here. I see you performing in a lot of places. You're growing a fan base, at least from what I can tell from stalking your social media numbers. And and then so I'm thinking to myself, is this what is going through Chris's head during this time of growth? Like, he's seeing more shows happen, he's performing more places, he's getting more fans. Like, what holds in the future? Because I know you're also working on a record,
Hmm.
and I'm just curious, like, what's the future like for you?
Yeah, I think for now it's more the same. Um, yeah, I've been able to get a little bit of a spark and get some embers going,
Hmm.
and hopefully I can fan that flame and make it grow. I mean, I feel like to a certain extent it's sort of a snowball effect.
Sure.
Um,
Wow, went from fire to
and
snowball on that one.
yeah, not a good thing to do in songwriting. Don't mix your metaphors.
That's funny. But go on. Yeah, it's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, yeah, where you know the more people that notice what you're doing and start to understand it and like it, that just generates more and more momentum. So hopefully I can just keep that rolling and slowly grow. I mean, I right now I'm at a point where I'm still literally thinking about one fan at a time.
Right.
Can
Which
I connect with one person at a time and make a fan out of that one person? And if I can do that, you know, a bunch of times over the course of a show,
yeah. What else?
then
What else is
then
there?
it's
Right.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if you talk to Hutchinson, he'd probably say the same thing. One fan at a time. Do you think that do you think that I guess where am I going with this? Do you think that the future for your music is going to be dictated by the place that you're at, or the music, or the places you play? I think about this. I was thinking about this today, actually, because
Hmm.
I just released some music, and I'm just kind of going through the paces of like, here's more music for people, and I'm like looking for gigs. I had that hangout with that artist that I was telling you about earlier, and it was an interesting conversation because what I found was basically what I feared, which is like, if I'm looking for a specific kind of like listening room, in the round house concert kind of vibe, it's a little bit rare in this part of the country, and it's going to come down to doing different kinds of shows. And I'm running into this thing of like, do I want to do that? Is that something that I'm doing, or is it going to be like, I got to focus on weekender gigs where I'm like constantly traveling out of state so that I can fulfill that part of me? um, so I guess like, I wonder with you, do you feel like your music is going to be driven by the environment that you're in or the people that listen to you? You know what I mean?
Uh, this probably sounds like a cop out answer, but I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay, no, sure, it's fine. I'm not binary about it. I'm just wondering because
Yeah.
I feel like currently I'm struggling with figuring out whether I need to be focusing on the environment that I'm in. You know, the environment that I'm in says I should be playing, like, I don't know, community places and art walks and things like that or whatever.
Hmm.
And that's what the environment is telling me I should sign up for. Which I don't know if that's where my actual listeners would be. It would be sort of like me having to fold my music into something that's a little more palatable for a wider audience. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So I guess like, if it's not binary for you, what's the ratio on that for how you approach your audience, your environment, and your songs, your art?
Well, first of all, I think it's easier and easier every single day to reach a wider audience because of social media and um, how easy it is to release music. You know, here in Colorado, we can market to people in the Philippines or
Right. Yeah.
New Zealand. Um, so I think uh, geographically that doesn't matter as much, but at the same time, if you're looking to play live shows, you still have to find your niche.
Yeah. Because let's be
And
honest, the live shows is where the money's at.
yeah, for
That's where your
sure,
living is. Yeah.
for sure. So yeah, I mean, I'm the same as you. I try and seek out those writers' round nights or the listening room environments, um, and they can be few and far between
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Which becomes a struggle for when you're trying to actually make it a living.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
does that affect your art?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I mean, I look at it as, I'm going to write the songs that I write. And if I need to do those bar or brewery gigs every now and then, that's okay. I can
Cool.
do it. If people like it, great. Maybe I get it a few more fans. If
Hmm.
not, no big deal.
Cool. Yeah. So you're just kind of what is it? Water off a duck's butt.
I
um,
try and be that way, but it's easier said than done.
yeah. Well, let's talk about your writing process because I'm curious. Take me through it. What is you're gonna write a song? You're writing a song today. What is the process for you?
To be honest, it varies. Sometimes it starts with a lyric that pops into my head. Sometimes it starts with a melody. Other times I'm just noodling around on the guitar and I find something that I like and then it grows from there. So um I don't have like a set process. That being said, there are tools that I use to sort of nudge the process along
Okay.
and to help it be more efficient.
What are those kinds of tools? I guess I'm. It's kind of coming back to that technical aspect of you. I think it's coming back to that dissecting mode that you have inside of you, where you can deconstruct stuff. Because I know like we all have like different approaches. Like one of my friends, her approach is to just kind of like listen to the universe, and the universe will speak
Hmm.
to her. The muse will show up if you just
Yeah.
kind of focus in on listening for the muse. Um, And she told me on this podcast, she told me something along the lines of like, you just have to be open to the muse and it'll come. And my approach is way different. My approach is, I told her, that's weird because my approach, or it's weird for me because my approach is I act like the muse owes me money. So I just go like, hey, you come here. You need to come over here right now,
Yeah.
and I just kind of workhorse it. I just kind of like just rely on the fact that if I have a hammer and nail, I'm gonna figure out how to get the house up. You know what I mean? And I think other people, they just kind of take an artistry approach, like more of an identifier of just they're an artist and artists make art, and that's just kind of the thing, and it ebbs and flows. And sometimes you don't write for 6 months, and then you write for 6 months straight. So I'm curious about your approach to it.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the season now where I'm getting ready for a record. And so, I have a batch of songs that I'm pretty sure are going to be on the record, but at the same time,
Cool.
I'm trying to come up with new stuff that might be better.
That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I have my songs ready for another record after this one that I have, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm still writing in that sort of same theme, just in case I find something better.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think um the way I work is sort of a combination of the hammer and nail, like you said, and you know, being open to whatever comes from the universe or the muse, whatever. I
Right.
I think you have to have your antenna up, listening for ideas that come up in conversations, um, and run with those ideas when they hit you.
Right.
And I think the more that you do that, the easier it becomes to find that muse or inspiration.
Now,
Um,
now
and
do
so
you?
the
Oh, sorry. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that for me, the more disciplined I am with writing, the easier it becomes. Like if I
Hmm.
take a 6 month break,
Yeah,
then
it's
it
like a
gets
stretch. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to get that train moving again.
Yeah, it's like warming up the body before a run kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what is uh what is your approach to themes? Do your records have themes? I know. Let's talk about your last record because last record kind of had a theme, right? What was the theme of the last
Hmm.
record?
Well, it was called Covering Old Scars,
And that came out this year.
and yeah, in
Okay,
February.
sure. Okay, go on.
And yeah, it sort of had a forced theme, I guess.
A forced theme. What do you mean by that?
Because well, I didn't write these songs with a theme in mind,
Okay.
but uh when I was recording, I started thinking about, well, how do these songs all tie together?
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out that that they all have something to do with my past and trying to get over things, or revisit things that didn't go the way I thought they were going to go.
Sure.
So it's trying to like um get closure with old wounds, or things that didn't go the way I wanted them to.
So what's the new record looking like? Is there a theme being shaped, or do you just go by do you go kind of like conspiracy theory style, where you just like do a bunch of things and then you look at them and you go, how do I put the thread to the thread? Is that what is your approach?
I've never thought about that, the conspiracy style. That's really
Yeah,
funny.
it's like that meme of Charlie Day on
Yeah.
the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes I feel like
Yeah.
songwriters do that. We write like 2,000 songs, and of course we're gonna find a thread if we look at
Yeah.
2,000 things.
While I would like to write with a theme and be intentional about it, I feel like I totally fall into that conspiracy category.
I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I'm not so much like that. I plan quite a bit ahead. For me, and I think honestly it has more to do with my ADHD, where if I don't plan ahead, I won't be able to focus on anything. So I need to
Mm.
kind of like know what the next fixation is going to be. You know what I mean? which I think really I've just barely started to learn how to work with in my older age. But I always think in themes. Like I'm always thinking that music and albums are like an art exhibit, and everything like matters. If you look at my Instagram right now, it's like everything's red and stuff because the new record is called Wild Blood, and it's just kind of always I'm always thinking that when you listen to a song, you're kind of walking into a space, and what does the space look like? So I always think of my songs as like little vignettes of cinema, because I'm always thinking of what is the listener supposed to feel and see when they walk into my space. And
Yeah.
so I'm always interested in other people's approach, because other people's approach seems to be like, kick up the ratio, and then you'll find your thread afterwards. Do you feel like something's appearing to you in this new record? Do you see something that's brewing?
Yeah, I think so. I got engaged earlier this year,
Congratulations.
and thanks. So I feel like I've been writing a lot of like happy love songs.
That's nice. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've just been in that romantic mood, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, a lot of the songs that are coming out now are in that vein, and that's probably sort of what the record will be focused around.
Now you don't have to share it now because I know you're working on it, but have you been putzing around with a title?
No, not yet.
Okay. From what I understand, your approach is just like you're going to write and write and write, and then something is going to appear in that, and then you're going to find your title. So you kind of like sift through it in a very not sort of methodical way, but just in a very like focus on output. It seems like you focus on output, and then you sort of, it's like the what you said earlier. You sort of write the song and then you analyze after.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me I don't think of it as output. I think of it as following a process
Right.
and being outcome independent.
Yeah.
Like
Outcome
let's
independent. I like that. That's good.
let's write the song, and you know whatever it turns out to sound like, great. If it makes it to the record, awesome. If not, no big deal. We can save it for another day or scrap it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just try and focus on writing consistently, and uh, then yeah, I guess trying to figure out a thread through those
Yeah,
songs
yeah. I
later.
mean, I think that's good. I mean, I think that's probably the better way to write. You probably end up with more solid songs. You don't get it fixated on like this one song has got to crank it out until it makes sense to you. Um, the reason why I brought up output is because you announced that you're working on your new record, and your last record has only been out since February, so it's creeping up on a year, but it's very slowly creeping up on a year, and you're already working on your next record. And I've been thinking about output because I've been doing the same thing. I released my record in March or something. I don't remember when it came out, but I have this new record I'm working on, and that's coming out now. And I'm hoping to release it before 2023 is over. So that's going to be two in 1 year. So, but they're EPs; they're not full lengths like you had. Was Covering Scars an EP or an LP? Is it a full
EP.
length EP?
No.
Okay. Is this
Yeah.
next one going to be a full length?
No.
Nope, EP. Okay, so you're like me. We're doing like two EPs a year, which is a lot of output. That's a lot of work. And do you feel that pressure coming from like the social media world? Because that's kind of how I approach it. It's not that I feel pressured to do it. I sort of have a general outline of what I'm trying to do, but I do know that it's to my advantage to continue to release and continue to release.
Yeah. Well, I think the lifetime or the lifeline of a record has shortened significantly.
Yeah, yeah,
Like when we were growing up, um, someone could put out a record and then tour on it for
yeah.
18
Three.
months,
Yeah,
two
yeah,
years maybe.
yeah. Yeah, I think
Um,
the output for us was
and
already,
then
and it already seemed fast, but for us, it was like the average was about 2 or 3 years before the next record, which was, it seems fast at the time because the last version of that was like every 5 years. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
now we're pumping out two EPs a year.
yeah.
So
And
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
I think it's turned into, like I said, with social media, it's turned into an attention game
Mm.
where in order to stay relevant and not fall behind, we're sort of forced to have a higher output and churn out material more frequently
Yeah. Do you
so we
find?
can stay
Oh,
so
sorry.
we can stay so we can stay in the front of people's minds and continue to sell tickets to shows and just keep the train moving. Because if you don't release now for 2 years, then you're basically having to start over and
Yeah.
rebuild all that momentum.
Yeah, I've definitely feel that problem. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it does feel that strange. It's kind of it's an odd thing. I think I don't really know how I feel about it. I don't know if I like it or not. I think the only reason I like it is because it kind of works in the way my brain works. So I'm okay with it because
Hmm.
I'm very in my older age I've become very comfortable with letting go, which is sort of saying this is what I have. These are my um this is like my songwriting ability at the moment, and these are the tools that I have to get this record done at the moment. These are the things that I have at the moment, and that's what it represents. Is like whatever's at the moment. And do you have a hard time with that? Do you have because I know a lot of artists have a hard time letting go of their records. They sort of like sit on it for a while, or do you feel like you're just kind of like fly birdie fly?
I think when I was younger, I had that mentality of wanting to hold on to something until it was absolutely perfect.
Hmm.
Because I think it was because I was worried, like, what if I never write a song this good again?
Right.
If this
Yeah.
is the if this
I
is the
feel
only
that.
thing, it's
Yeah.
got to be the best thing anyone's ever heard and anyone will ever hear again.
Yeah.
Um, and I think once I realized, like, no,
There'll be
if you
other
just
songs.
focus on your
Yeah.
process, there will be other songs. Some of them might be better, some of them might not be as good as what's coming out now, but there will be other songs. You don't have to worry about that. So yeah, I think I feel less attached uh, to keeping songs in the nest,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can let them
Do you
fly
think,
out, do their thing.
yeah. Do you think that that's kind of a same thing? Speaking of threads, do you think that's kind of the same thing as like how you approach songwriting in general, but now you're doing it with albums? Like instead of singular songs, you're now doing it with a collection of songs. Like the point is to just put them out and them to be out in the world and for people to find them.
Yeah, I think so. Um, at at the same time, it's not me just putting out whatever song. There is
Sure.
still some quality control
Of course.
and
Yeah.
uh, you know, intention behind it.
But the fear isn't
Um,
there. The
but
fear
yeah,
is gone. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the fear isn't there anymore. Um, yeah, I'm like I said, I'm less attached to the outcome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got
But
three
that
more.
doesn't mean,
Oh, sorry. Doesn't mean what? There's a delay on the Zoom,
yeah,
so I, I got stuck.
yeah, no worries.
That doesn't mean what?
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't mean that I don't push these songs out and try and uh give them as much momentum as possible.
Sure.
Still have to push them and try and get people to hear them. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I always think of albums and songs, especially albums, because albums are so embarrassing sometimes. That I always think of them as like kind of like kids. Like you have a kid and you love that kid, but then you have another kid and you have to love that kid. And then you have another kid and you have to love that kid. And the moment that you have a kid and you don't love that kid, you're a bad parent. So so it's kind of like you have to just continue to reset your bursting love for this thing that you made,
Hmm.
which I think is cool. So I got three more questions for you. You could decide to answer or not answer, but I am curious about it. So the first answer is, I mean, the first question is, what drives you? Like, what drives you to wake up and make art? For what makes you feel like like your blood is boiling for it? We're gonna have to
I
keep it
think
pretty short.
I think it's just a quest to find my people. Finding friends hasn't always been the easiest thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized that being vulnerable and putting that out into the world has led to more impactful relationships with people. So yeah, I'm constantly trying to find my tribe and
Oh, that's
bring more
really
people
tender,
into it.
buddy. That's really tender. I like that. Okay, so
Thanks.
we're also gonna have to keep this one pretty short.
Yeah.
What is the opposite of that drives you? What scares you? What are you most afraid of when it comes to your art?
What if nobody likes it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that really bothers you, huh?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I hear that. I'm like I don't have the nobody likes it problem. I have the what if I what if I give too much of me? If I give too much
Mm.
away. I have
Yeah.
that one. That's
Yeah.
my fear. It's like, am I giving too much away? Am I telling too many secrets? Am I like being a little too much of myself in this stranger that I'm giving it to? You know what I mean? Okay, and then the last question, which I ask all of my guests. So thank you for being on, Chris. Really appreciate you being here, buddy. And my last question is always the same. If you can give me, which is I am me, and other small time songwriters like me, one honest piece of advice about the business or the craft, what would it be?
Uh, Follow the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. There are so many people in music trying to take advantage of musicians, or give us the short end of the stick, and it can be really hard to kill people with kindness. But I think that's the best way to get ahead. And you never know, that person who didn't treat you well, they might be the next big thing, and they say, you know what, that guy was really nice. I'm gonna call him up or ask him to open for me, or write with him, or whatever it is. So I I'm a big believer in treating other people the way you want to be treated, and trusting that that kindness will come back around.
Yeah, kindness. It's like one of my weaknesses I got to work on. I'm not good at the kindness. Um, all right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, buddy. I really appreciate it. It was a good conversation. I liked how mellow it was. It was kind of like just like two cats meeting each other for the first time or something. It was just very chill, which I think is fun. Where can people find you, buddy? And whatever you got coming up next? Maybe don't do any shows or anything because the podcast is pretty sporadic as far as posting.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, you can find all of my music stuff is under Christopher Morse. Morse is like the code. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube is all at Christopher Morse Music. So you can find me there. And then on Spotify, it's just Christopher Morse, or wherever else you get your music.
Yeah.
You can find me there.
Make sure to hit that play button a lot of times and share the song too. That really helps in the algorithms when it comes to Spotify and all that stuff. So,
and don't be afraid to shoot me a message if you hear something you like, or see a post that you like, make a comment. I will reply. I guarantee it.
There you go. There's that kindness. All right. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, man. See ya.
See ya.